David Abdullah. Very good morning to you, brother. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, brother. And morning to all of your many listeners this morning. And, very happy birthday to Leroy as well.
Yes.
Saw him last year, actually, at his birthday concert, celebrating his birthday last year. And, of course, happy 41st Republic Day anniversary to Trinidad and Tobago. I saw a couple of people I know getting national awards. So I want to say a special congratulations to Folade Motota, who got the award for women in development. And there were a number of other people I know, public servants and others. Calypso Rose, I think, very well deserved. Professor Courtney Bartholomew was toiling in the vineyards for very many years in the field of medicine and pioneering work as well. Also very well deserved. And
Bungie was up there too.
Yes, and our 4x4 gold medal winners at the World Championship a couple of weeks ago, they got a Shakonia gold, I think it was. And of course, they brought honor and glory not just to themselves, but to our country, Trinidad and Tobago. So recognition is well deserved. There are a number of others. I can't remember all the names.
I'm always encouraged. I'm always encouraged when people who are hitherto not in the public domain get the award, because it says to everybody that we all have a part that we are playing, and somebody's looking.
Yes, and the young man who helped someone who was, being attacked. I think he got killed in the process. And he's been awarded posthumously, and he demonstrated for a young man tremendous presence of mind, and also demonstrated what a good citizen is, somebody who helps others who are in distress, even to the point where he himself unfortunately tragically lost his life.
It's currently 4 minutes after 11 o'clock. And David Abdullah is here with me. Is that a secret?
No, it
is not. You just
I heard you mentioned it at the start of your program.
I think I did, didn't I? Well, so much for that secret.
Well, no, that's all right. That's all right.
Remember, do not tell Bishop a secret.
I went across together with a number of trade unionists.
You went across to Venezuela.
I was across last Saturday and Sunday. There was an international conference in solidarity with Venezuela.
Okay.
And very interesting developments happening there. In fact, President Maduro announced something. I saw Christiana Amanpour interview the president of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, a few days ago on her program outside the UN, because of course the UN General Assembly is taking place. Yes, and President of Chile was saying, well, there's good news about Venezuela because there's talks that are starting up in Dominican Republic. Well, we heard that news last weekend when President Maduro did indicate that the government, because the government had always been committed to dialogue. And in fact, President Maduro said that he talks with the opposition all the time, but they don't admit that they talk with him. So that there have been, discussions and some dialogue taking place, and sometimes agreements, and then the opposition breaks the agreement and so on. But President Maduro did indicate last week Sunday, when we had a session with him for several hours in Sunday morning into the afternoon, that the President of Dominican Republic is facilitating a dialogue between the government and the opposition, and there are 4 governments that are represented in the talks, perhaps as referees. I'm not sure what the right word is, but two of those governments, of course, are very close to the opposition, or closer to the opposition than they are to the government, and 2 of the governments are closer to the government than they are to the opposition.
Like a mediating force.
That's right. Yes. So you have the Dominican Republic in the middle, and then you have Chile and Mexico on there, and Nicaragua and Bolivia as well. So those 5 governments now are going to try to mediate that conflict. In the same way that we have to give credit where credit is due, that the guerrilla war that was taking place between the guerrilla movement FARC and also the other guerrilla movement, the ELN, I think it is, in Colombia,
yes.
And the Colombia government. Those peace talks were brokered by President Chavez initially and President Maduro.
And it's interesting of the results, because
Cuba.
FARC has now joined the civilian electoral process.
That's right.
Giving up their guns. So there is nothing that is too difficult if you have dialogue.
That's right. And Cuba was the government where the talks were taking place, and Cuba played a key role.
Irony.
And a few days ago, we actually had World Peace Day, so it's important that there's peace. And there are going to be elections in Venezuela in a couple of weeks' time. I mean, they say that
these are local elections.
These are elections for the governors of the 23 states. which is major. And then next year there'll be municipality elections for the municipalities, and then the presidential elections. And so people say that Maduro is a dictator, but actually there'll be more elections in Venezuela than any other country.
Is it true to say that these elections, however, have been fair?
Yes, they're being. I mean, the Carter Foundation, which, as you know,
Jimmy Carter's foundation,
has operated as a kind of internationally respected watchdog on elections and other things, have been to Venezuela, some years ago, and did certify the elections as being free and fair.
So, with that statement, and we got to get to Petrotrin, guys.
Yes, I know, that's lots on the agenda.
But with that statement, however, is it true to say that we are being fed propaganda, because mainstream reports coming out all point to two things: upheaval, mass demonstration, and oppression on behalf of the Maduro government? Now, is it that we are getting twisted news, filtered news, or is there some truth in what we are hearing?
It certainly has been one-sided news, in the sense that the demonstrations and protests have been largely confined to certain areas of Caracas. It was not widespread throughout the country, was not widespread in Caracas itself. The reality is that Venezuela is in a difficult economic situation. There's no doubting that.
Is the reality what we see, that people are starving to the point of almost for survival, or is this?
I think that is an extreme description of the situation. There's no doubt that there are shortages and so on, partly caused by the fall in oil prices and the difficulty to import, partly also caused by the large business people commercial interests who traditionally import items and who therefore, in trying to squeeze the government and make things ungovernable, quote unquote, have also stopped importing. And there are problems of foreign exchange. There are real problems, but there's also an agenda by the opposition forces to make the situation worse than it should be.
We'll see how that plays out.
But we hope that these discussions between the government and the opposition that are taking place in the DR work itself to a satisfactory end.
David Abdullah is the voice you're hearing, leader of the Movement for Social Justice in Trinidad and Tobago, and a former executive with the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. Petrotrin, I can't get you without that. So, comrade, it's good to have you here. There are some questions I have for you.
Yes.
The current preliminary finding results of an internal audit was repeated by the opposition leader, Mrs. Prasad Bisesar. That allegation against ANV Oil and Gas Company, owned by Hanif Nazim Bask, has received over $80 million, it is claimed, for ghost gas. Now, Petrotrin subsequently held rush meetings and finalized the report. They have passed it on to the line minister. But what we heard from the opposition leader at the time was result of a preliminary report. The question is, looking at this as objectively as we can, I think I have to consider what ANV said yesterday. They said yesterday that the problem with this so-called fake oil may be at Petrotrin's measuring standards and techniques and not with the AV company. Is that at all possible?
Yes and no. So let me say that the issue is not a new issue in general terms. When the whole process of farming out and leasing out oil fields began 20-odd years ago, the union always raised concerns because of the way in which the process was implemented, where you had, for example, and the problems were multifaceted. You had people who were working in Petrotrin, who then, or his predecessor companies, who then left the company and went to either start up on one of these lease operator companies or went to work with one of the companies and worked with a lot of data and information. And you also had a situation where oil production declined in Petrotrin's own wells to a point which the company claimed was uneconomic, 5-8 barrels of oil a day and so on. But had there been proper working, servicing of those wells, the production could have been higher. So the union felt that the wells were deliberately being left to run down, then making the case for them to be given out to other
somebody
operators.
else.
The other operators would come in And then miraculously within weeks or months, the production moved from 8 barrels a day to 50 and 100 barrels a day. And of course, the lease operator would then make a significant amount of money. So there is a lot of collusion historically between persons within Petrotrin at different levels of the company and these private individuals who operate the lease out and farm out, to the point where in the early days I recall a specific case where guys, because they used to work with the company, knew all of the lines, and because they had tanks that were shared tanks, what happened was that oil was run from the Petrotrin tank into the private operator's tank, fiscalized there, in other words, measured there as oil produced by the lease out operator, and then pumped back into the Petrotrin tank.
Let us make sure we understand that fine language. The oil was stolen from Petrotrin, put into barrels by independent operators, and sold to Petrotrin.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
You're not known for being that nice.
Well, I hear you.
David Abdullah.
Yeah, in effect, it was stealing.
David Abdullah is my guest this morning. We're talking about the situation at Petrotrin, specifically with their measuring standards. I got a question for you. Well production recording, dipstick tests, and sales tank integrity checks should ensure accountability. It leads me to the question: is this oil leak spurious? Oil leak coming from A and V. Let us tell you what I'm talking about. A and V say that there's a possibility that some of the oil was lost along the way. And I am asking my guests, with all these measures, i.e., the production recording, dipstick test, and the sales tank integrity before Petrotrin actually gets it. Is this possible?
Well, I'll tell you, because I was talking to some of the guys in the union yesterday, actually. And, you see, it's supposed to be measured at different points along the way. One is at the point where it leaves AV's tanks, or whoever the lease operator is, and then goes into Petrotrin's tanks. Petrotrin then pumps that from a main storage area in Forest Reserve up to Point of Pear.
Okay.
And there's supposed to be recordings of how much oil is pumped for the day. So it's supposed to be every day you say we pumped 5,000 barrels of oil. Point of Pear now is supposed to be able to also record how much oil it receives from Forest Reserve. And they therefore supposed to say we got 5,000 barrels of oil. Now, in some cases, there's a certain amount of water as well mixed in, but let's assume for argument's sake it's 5,000 barrels. Point of Pear was recording less oil over a considerable period of time than Forest Reserve was reporting as having been pumped. Point of Pear, what should have happened immediately, investigation should have taken place. My understanding is that Point of Pear itself was not sure, Petrotrin as a whole was not sure, whether it was as a result of possible leakages or if it was a result of something else.
I can understand that if it's about $5 million. I can understand if over a short period of time, because this audit was for over a short period of time. So if you're telling me that there was negligence or somebody didn't follow through or somebody probably thought sedimentation, whatever argument you want to put, something happened in the middle there, I'll say okay. But you're talking about a lot of oil here. And to tell me that you've got the means of finding out because it is sent to you at Petrotrin and you did not realize it. And for a company to tell me that what we are putting out, we are being paid way in excess of what we're putting out, and we did not realize it. I am looking at, what is the word? A fish market from both sides.
Yes, and this is what I'm saying. There's collusion at different levels within and outside.
Yes.
So you have a situation where, I'm not speaking about AV specifically now, where oil may be coming into the tank farm, say in Forest Reserve, right? And it's supposed to be 5,000. Let's use 5,000 easy figure. And of that 5,000, 3,000 is supposed to be Petrotrin's own oil that it produced, and 2,000 is supposed to be oil from several lease out operators and farm out operators.
Right.
You then get a situation now where Petrotrin claims its production has not fallen. Yes, same 3,000.
So 3,000 is there.
Right. But the total amount that goes up to Point of Pear is 5,000, yes. But the lease out operators are claiming they now produce 2,500. So it therefore implies that Petrotrin's production would have fallen by 500 barrels.
Or somebody's lying.
Yeah? So there seems to be a lot of problems in this whole, which is why the union does not like the system, because there are too many avenues for corruption to be taking place at different levels.
Are the measurement standards, David Abdullah, at Petrotrin up to date? Now, you said the unions have been complaining about it, but let us talk about the actual standards they have for measuring. Are the standards at Petrotrin up to date, which is to say consistent with those used by other oil-producing nations, where oil controls a magnificent percentage of their GDP?
Yeah, I was asked that question yesterday to find out exactly in all of the areas what methods they use, whether it is electronic measures or whether it is dipping a tank and so on with a stick, which can be used as a measure. You just simply, once you get your level, the volume of the tank, you just make a calculation as to how much oil is inside there. And you might be out by a few barrels, but you're not going to be out by 1,000 barrels or 2,000 barrels or that kind of thing. Yes. So the issue in my mind is not so much the measurement standards, but it is the systems that ensure compliance and that nobody is falsifying data and information at whatever point and so on. Because if we're talking about corruption, this is big money. This is big money.
That's right.
This is big money.
And that is why I'm concerned that in big money, which folks are talking to me about a trust system. I want you to explain to me that trust system that exists.
You can't have trust in this matter.
Well, precisely my point.
This is not a matter of trust. This is not the left hand and the right hand, taking money out of your left pocket and putting it in your right pocket. It's not the same.
This is raping a whole nation.
That's right.
And taking out. So this trust system I'm hearing, does that still obtain?
I'm not sure about that, but it certainly ought not to obtain. And let me just make the point, that as leader of MSJ, I had called for the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate corruption, past and present, whether it is ferry, whether it is AV oil, whether it is other matters, whether it is matters relating to what happened in the last government with Beetham wastewater, all kind of projects and so on that we heard about. Things with EMBD and land and HEC, all of those things. We need to have a special prosecutor, as happened, for example, when Ramesh Maharaj was Attorney General and Carl Hudson Phillips was appointed special prosecutor, and you had Bob Lindquist as the forensic auditor who could follow the money, track the money, and so on. We need that kind of resource to be able to deal with corruption, because the ferry story, and I was listening to you talking to Rishi a while ago. At the end of the day, what is going to be the outcome of that GSC? What was the outcome of the Mute report? Information, but information not leading to prosecution of persons who may have been involved in wrongdoing is really just bacchanal.
Since you went there, do you feel a particular resolve in that area just real quickly? Do you feel a resolve in seeing a report coming out of the GSC coming to real prosecution where necessary? Do you feel that?
I don't think there'll be a report, but I don't think that it will lead to prosecution.
All right, let me go back to Petrotrin. so much for my optimism. Thank you, comrade. I needed that dash of water on top of this. David Abdullah, the leader of the MSJ, is my guest this morning. While the complaint is that Petrotrin lacks the managerial expertise to properly lead the company, it is argued by the union that too much money is paid to management. Folks, however, have proffered that getting the right management personnel requires salaries compatible with what is paid internationally. How do you reconcile these different perspectives?
The first thing that we need to have is a board that is appointed. You have to start at the top. And so the executive management is hired by the board. So if the board is not competent, then you're not going to get competent management. If the board is politically appointed, you're going to get political appointees or hirings in the executive management. And then the executive management will hire or promote political people down the line. And that has been one of the major problems of Petrotrin through the years. And that is why the committee that I was a member of to review the operations of Petrotrin and so on, made the very explicit recommendations which we presented to the Prime Minister on the 6th of June this year. And then there was a meeting that was supposed to be with the Joint Select Committee, the Standing Committee on Energy, chaired by the Prime Minister. And that meeting was a farce. And so on, because the Standing Committee met and discussed the report, and then only 2 members of the committee were there because to actually meet with them. We met with them for 5 minutes, so that meeting was a farce. But what we said is that the members of the board of directors are selected through a process which provides for comprehensive and transparent input and feedback from key stakeholders to ensure that members possess the relevant experience and capabilities to address priority matters critical to the transformation and sustainable development of the company. And then we also want to say Petrotrin adopts a policy whereby the board of directors' terms of office are cycled in such a manner as to ensure that at all times there is continuity of membership of at least 50% of the board. In other words, you don't have a situation where after every election or every new minister of energy is appointed, you get a new board. Because you can't plan a sustainable future with such a short
All
cycle.
the priorities are changed every time you begin to,
That's right.
you've initiated one.
That's right. So people don't know if they're going left, right, backwards, forwards, and ultimately the company goes backwards.
Let me just be clear that of these two things. So on the one hand, the argument is not the size of the salaries of the people to be of international standard, but first the chicken or the egg. The first thing you're saying is, get me a board that is non-partisan, and then we will worry about who is paid what. That
is correct. And the sad thing was that the cabinet did not go with this recommendation of the committee. So they appointed a new board without any comprehensive and transparent input and feedback from key stakeholders. So you have people there who, I think a former mayor of Arima is on the board, another person who is a political person is on the board, and so on. And also very sad to say that the chairman of the board, Mr. Espinay, was a member of this committee. Mr. Selwyn Lashley, who is PS, was chairman of the committee. So members of the committee made recommendations as to how the board should be appointed and then accepted an appointment inconsistent with the recommendations that we made. And then Robert Riley was a member of the committee. He's now an advisor to the board, and a board which was not appointed with how it should have been appointed. And then there was a Mr. Myers, who was a former PS and so on, who was co-opted to the committee. He also is an advisor. So 4 people who were members of the committee are now either members of the board or advisors to the board.
Staggering.
It looked as if people were doing this thing on the committee to create a job for themselves afterwards. I was asked by the Prime Minister to serve on the board, and I turned it down on the principle that the process of appointing the board was inconsistent with what we had recommended.
You sit on a board, and the decision is to take a maxi to Port of Spain, but the people who are on that committee, in fact, own private vehicles, and then they decide to go with the private vehicles anyway. That's essentially what you're saying. 25 minutes after 11 o'clock, staggering as it is. Let me turn across to the side of the workers and the union, because while it is one thing to look at the managers and how we are carrying through this very important resource and the revenue thereof to the country, some have posited that compared to oil producers in other countries, Petrotrin used 2 or 3 times the workers for the size and output derived presently. Are they correct?
Yes and no. Yes, there are international benchmarks which suggest that Petrotrin has more employees than other companies with the same output. But then on the other hand, you have a situation where in some areas of Petrotrin, in the technical areas, the company is understaffed, so that there are too few refinery operators employed, to the point where there is built-in overtime, which is costing the company huge amounts of money, which the union is against. Because you don't have enough operators to run the thing. So it means that you have operators having to work 16 hours and then come off for 8 and then come back on again.
You're talking about management of resources then, is that what you're telling me?
Yes, and this has been going on not for 6 months, this has been going on for 6 years and more. So that the company has no succession planning to ensure that when people retire, and a large cohort of the workers in Petrotrin are 50 and above, and when they go, there are no requisite skill levels to replace them. So we're going to be in serious trouble. So there are too many administrative people. In other words, there's some areas of the company which are not involved in production or in refining, which are large in terms of numbers relative. And therefore, if you need to look, for example, at staffing overall, you really need to look at areas which are not involved directly in production or in refining and so on.
Is it true to accurate to extrapolate from what you're saying that you concede there is a case of too many workers in a general sense, but this can be corrected by having them utilized in other areas efficiently. Am I correct on that?
Well, not necessarily. Well, because somebody who is just not to pick on a department, I'm not saying that they should go, but just take
a pipe man may not work.
Somebody who is in public relations, right, can't be an operator. They don't have the right skills.
I'm just trying to follow, because my follow-up question to that is, you're talking about there is going to be some laying off going on if we try to get this efficiently. Now, I'm not saying that this is the first place you go. I go along with what you were saying. Let us get the management right. Then let us get
there are too many managers. In other words, the company is too top-heavy. There are too many layers of decision-making. And because there are too many layers of decision-making, nobody is accountable and responsible. Everybody passes the buck up the line, whereas people need to take responsibility and accountability for the areas that they are in charge of.
So we need tweaking and correcting from all levels.
Yes, we need a flatter organizational structure, and we need one that, and this is what the committee recommended as well, that there be 3 business units, not 3 separate companies, but 3 units which operate with full responsibility and accountability enshrined to them, so that you would have Trinma, because that the production in offshore is critical in terms of the viability of the company, land exploration and production, and then refining and marketing. And what we said is, therefore, that the person who is head of Trinma, or the person who is head of land E&P or the refining and marketing, must be fully accountable for what takes place within their business unit.
Put on your political hat here for a minute. You're the leader of the MSJ. Question for you. With all you have seen, because you've been in the oil industry all these years, are you optimistic that, in fact, we are going to get resolve that targets the corrective measures suggested? I know you said one such meeting went the wrong way. I understand that.
Yeah.
But do you think now, because the coffers are not as full as they used to be, there's a reality check on all of the nation?
Sure.
Do you see a resolve towards correcting this the proper way? Are you encouraged by anything you have seen?
I think attempts are going to be made to correct it, but the attempts that will be made to correct it might not very well be in the right way, in the way that I would like to see it go. Let me put it that way around. Some people may think it's the right way, so let me not be prejudicial on that, but not the way I think it should go. In other words, there's great pressure to sell, to privatize. That's an easy, simple solution and so on. But that is fraught with its own implications in terms of loss of capacity of the country, loss of revenue and jobs and a whole set of other things like that. And really reallocating wealth from state resources, or the state, and therefore the people, and reallocating that wealth into the hands of a few private people, a foreign company, or some big local operators. So I don't think that's the way to go. I am not confident that the transformation generally, not only of Petrotrin, but of the economy that is necessary, the diversification of the economy that is necessary, or the transformation of our institutions of state, criminal justice system, to deal with not just one set of crime, but all crime, whether it's from murders or white collar crime and so on. The parliament as an institution that passes laws that are really in the interest of people and provides the kind of oversight over the executive that is necessary. The functioning of cabinet and the administration in terms of implementing decisions. I don't think that our institutions of state are able to deal with the challenge of Trinidad and Tobago 2017 going forward. I think these institutions are like a Me Too phone, and you want to load up
iPhone
Mr.
business,
West, yes, Mr. West fancy apps.
Yes.
It's just not going to work. It just can't work.
Well, it's a reality check for all of the nation, because from what you're saying, which is what we find now, even when the AG moves to correct a situation, you find that the punishment that's there is minimal. It's a slap on the wrist. So you have to go back and fix that. We have to rip off a lot of templates and concepts and that we have in procedures that we have in place in order to correct these issues. So some upheaval is what we are going to need, but we must have the stomach for it.
For it, yes. I mean, the system is just not working for the majority of people.
But is it true to say that while the system that oversees the system. While the system needs to get some corrections that we're talking about, unions also have to get some correction.
Yes, I have no doubt that there are some unions that need to rethink their role. I have said, that many unions have lost their way. They're focused too narrowly on their members at the workplace, whereas in 1937, it was not a trade union movement, it was a labor movement which embodied and encompassed all working people and people who were not working.
Wonderful differentiation, yes.
And focusing not just on industrial relations at the workplace, but on all the social and political and economic issues of the day. The agenda was multifaceted.
Yes.
And Sir Arthur Lewis, he wasn't Sir then, he wasn't a Nobel Prize winner, but wrote a very important pamphlet called Labour in the West Indies for the British Fabian Society in 1938-39, which was published by New Beacon Books, headed by John LaRose, Trinidadian and so on, who passed away, and Sarah White, and it with an afterword by Susan Craig, our noted Tobagonian sociologist and historian. And Arthur Lewis said what happened in the 30s was a revolution, because Labour had thrust itself into the political arena, encompassing everything in the society. And certainly trade unions that have moved away from those moorings need to refocus so that they're articulating the problems of the poor and powerless generally.
We are also going to need more time with you the next time we invite you here.
Well, we got through a lot this morning.
Yeah, we got through a lot this morning, I did. But,
Venezuela to AV oil
I have this insatiable appetite once I start getting context. I like to just follow through on it.
I know.
David Abdullah, leader of the MSJ, man, I appreciate you taking the time to come down this morning. I appreciate your clarity and your candid approach to it, because oftentimes you do not find a disposition to embrace the corrective measures from all sides. Everybody's got their agenda, and most folks like to say this is the way. Even when you were talking about your opinion, you said, "Well, that is what I proffer. It is not what I it is not the beginning and the end all." Which means you're not a follower of Donald Trump. Another topic.
No, but that's serious. And thanks, Rennie, for that. And there's tremendous controversy with his attacks on the African American athletes.
He goes after Curry. He goes after the footballer.
That's right. Yeah,
the language is frightening.
That's right.
Fire that SOB.
That's right. Imagine that, Anyways, but let me just say that, this Republic Day, one of the messages that, and I'm going to have a press conference tomorrow on it, is the idea of the Second Republic. Because as far as I'm concerned, the institutions of this and the system of the First Republic have failed, and we now need to bring fundamental change for the Second Republic.
Very big statement you made. You opened the door to another conversation, because as long as you accept, they say to overcome anything, you must accept that there is a problem. Once you accept there is a problem, then you're prepared to confront it, and then you deal with the consequences, as unpalatable as they may be sometimes. Makes a very good point for that Second Republic. Thank you, my brother. Have a wonderful day.